people usually use the word witch for those who mess around with dark magic and make deals with demons. Somewhere up on a lonely mountain, there's talk of a creepy house where a scary old witch has been living for years. Folks say she used to lure teenagers in and eat them. Just meeting her eyes could make you vanish from the world. She was like a tall, terrifying monster, at least that's what the stories say. Even with all these horror tales going around, there was this little boy who had made up his mind he wanted to be her student. Everyone believed witches used twisted magic to mess with people's thoughts and emotions, so nobody ever dared go near her place. But the kid didn't care. If he wanted to learn real magic, she was the one to teach him. The danger didn't scare him off. As he walked through the spooky corridor, a voice suddenly called out, asking what he was doing there. When he turned around, he was face to face with the very witch he'd been looking for. Now that she was right there in front of him, he froze. She was huge. The silence was heavy until she asked again what he was doing there. He was sweating bullets but kept reminding himself to stick to what he had practiced. He nervously blurted out that he wanted her to teach him magic. The witch looked surprised. Then, without saying much, she started murmuring some strange words he couldn't make sense of. They sounded dangerous. He figured it had to be some sort of curse, especially coming from her. Just as he was about to bolt, she suddenly pulled him into a hug. He didn't know what to think. She felt warm, smelled nice, and for some reason his heart was racing. Maybe that hug was part of some spell too. If so, he figured it'd be safer to get out of there, so he quickly pulled away, yelled something about being sorry, and ran off, saying he'd come back. The witch didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, the boy stood outside the mansion, replaying the whole thing in his head. His heart was still pounding. Was it magic? Had she cast something on him? Or was it just her being different? Whatever it was, it didn't feel like what he expected from an evil witch. He realized he couldn't stay scared forever. If he really wanted to be her student, he had to try harder. Back inside the house, the dark-haired woman stood by the window, lost in thought. That boy was kind of cute. Her eyes sparkled a little. She hadn't seen a human kid in ages. Everyone had been too scared to ever come near her. All she could do now was wait and hope he'd return. Watching him from behind the glass, all she could think was how sweet he looked. The problem was when she got nervous, her voice and face automatically turned scary. The next day, the boy came back. This time, more determined. He knew witches were dangerous, knew they played with deadly magic, but still he had to try. He gathered his nerves and knocked. The big gate creaked open, and there she was again, calmly petting her cat. The scene was still kind of spooky, but all he could focus on was how massive and intimidating she was. He greeted her kind of awkwardly. Without beating around the bush, she asked if he still wanted to be her student. That question caught him off guard. It was almost too easy. Then she asked if he was ready for it, and honestly, even he wasn't sure. Then she looked at him and asked if he understood what it meant to make a pact with a witch. He'd have to give her whatever price she chose. Back in the day, people had given up things like their eyes, their arms, even their skin or heart. So the question came back around, was he really ready to learn dark magic? After all, he wasn't just learning from anyone. This was a real witch. Her towering figure made the moment even more intense. But the boy, without flinching, said he'd rather lose part of his body than keep feeling like a failure. He was desperate. He just wanted her to teach him. The thought of taking something from him like that actually seemed silly to the witch. She calmly told him that a piece of him wouldn't be enough. He started panicking. Did she mean she wanted all of him? He quickly said he'd do whatever it took. Well, almost anything. But she softly touched his face and told him that wasn't necessary. That only made him more confused, so he asked again. He didn't have to do anything. Without giving a straight answer, she suddenly pulled him into her lap, ran her fingers through his hair, and kept telling him how well he was doing, asking if he was comfortable like that. Her only demand was simple: stay close, listen to her, and let himself be cared for. That was it. No big price, no scary sacrifice. Just be with her. That freaked him out even more, and he jumped away, asking what exactly she was doing. She apologized, saying maybe that was asking for too much. Then, with a softer tone, she said there might be a better way. She gently asked for his hand, which made him nervous, but this time she sat in his lap, resting her head and waiting for him to pat her like she'd done to him. He had no idea what was going on, but somehow that was it. He was now officially her apprentice. Later in his room, the boy was over the moon. He looked proudly at his new broom, his first tool as a witch's student. Even though she was scary, he reminded himself not to show it. He returned the broom to her, saying he had even fixed it up a bit. Then came the first test. She told him to hop on the broom and try to float. He was confused, but she insisted it was basic stuff. If he couldn't even handle that, things would get way harder. With no room for excuses, she pushed him to try. He nodded, nervous but willing. He'd never used magic before, but if it was just floating, he figured he could manage. He focused, stayed calm like she'd said, and after a moment his feet actually lifted off the floor. It didn't last though, he crashed down pretty hard. Embarrassed, he started apologizing and tearing up. He told her he must have no talent at all. He had hoped learning magic could change him, but maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe he just wasn't cut out for it. Hearing this, the witch got up, walked over, and started saying a spell. The first word out of her mouth was failure, and that made him panic even more. As she got closer, she kept complaining, saying she had no use for someone who couldn't succeed. Then, out of nowhere, she aimed her spell not at him, but at the broom. It burst into flames and turned to ash. She said it had awful balance anyway. Then she brought out her own broom and told him to try again. Magic wasn't just about casting spells, it was about believing in yourself. What he lacked wasn't power, it was confidence, and from now on, she'd be there to help him find it. She looked at him and told him to trust himself more. He nodded, yeah, maybe he could do this. All he had to do was focus. So he shut his eyes and tried to concentrate. And then, just like that, his feet left the ground again, but this time he actually stayed up. He was flying. For real. When he landed, he was beyond excited, thanking her again and again. But then, just as quickly, he apologized for being her student, even though he felt like he had no real talent. The witch didn't seem bothered at all. She reached out her hand, gently patted his head, and told him she was proud of him. That caught him off guard. He thought she'd be cold, maybe even cruel, but here she was, smiling and touching his face with kindness, all for something so small. She explained it wasn't about talent, it was about finding the right broom. That just took time, and she was totally okay with spending that time with him. Honestly, she was nothing like he'd expected. She was kind. Excited, he told her that one day he'd give her a ride on the broom once he was strong enough. He promised to keep training hard. Her reaction, totally unexpected. She practically melted at how cute he was. And that left him even more confused. How was he supposed to get used to any of this? Sure, having a real witch as his teacher still made his legs wobble now and then, but it also made him want to understand her more. So during one of their study sessions, he realized something: he didn't even know her name. When he asked, she seemed caught off guard. Her whole vibe shifted. She told him that witches' names were basically curses given by demons, and wanted to know why a human like him would want to know it. He explained he'd read about a spell that was supposed to help two people become friends. The idea was simple: write the other person's name on a piece of paper, fold it, and keep it safe. He'd already written his own name. She looked at his notes and asked if he'd been reading spellbooks on his own. He nodded. That didn't go over well. She snapped, said she hated fake spells that pretended to be real magic, said they were nothing but superstitions that disrespected true sorcery. Without warning, she destroyed the book with a quick chant, and the boy freaked out. He tried to defend it, begged her to let him study in his own way, said he could change, he just needed a chance. But she'd already decided. With a spell, everything went black around him. He couldn't see a thing. He panicked, shouting and asking what kind of creepy place this was. Her voice calmly told him she was just going to keep him there for a bit. His mind raced. Was this it? Was she giving up on him too, just like the book? Maybe he really wasn't worth teaching. He reached out, feeling something soft. Turned out it was her. She was there, gently stroking his head again. She said what he needed was real knowledge. Just then, the darkness vanished, replaced by shelves upon shelves of books. They were in a huge library. She told him she'd been collecting magical texts from all over the world, and now it was time to learn the right way. Just the two of them. She was about to start with the origins of magic, but he interrupted her. He couldn't really focus, not while he was being smushed between books and her. But with so many books everywhere and her not planning to move an inch, there wasn't much he could do, except brace himself in case another one came flying down. After a full day of learning, the woman casually suggested the blonde kid go over everything they'd covered, even though to him, it felt more like being pressured than anything else. Just as she was about to leave, he called out to her again, circling back to that talk they had about friendship. He apologized for maybe overstepping before, but while they were talking, he found the spell paper he had given her earlier. Seeing it made her stop. She brushed it off, saying it was just something silly, kind of like a superstition. That annoyed her a bit, but saying no to this new friend wasn't easy for her. So in the end, she gave in and signed the paper anyway. He told her name Esmeralda sounded nice. Even if the spell didn't do anything, the idea of getting along with his teacher made him feel better. Still, that didn't mean he was totally chill around her. Being her student didn't erase all the nerves he felt. Esmeralda soon asked him to clean her cauldron since she had something really important coming up. He agreed, but once he actually saw the size of that thing, it was kind of overwhelming. The tools and furniture in the room were massive, and cleaning wasn't exactly a quick or simple task. Even with a duster, there were spots he just couldn't reach. While trying to clean the bottom, he slipped and fell right into the cauldron. That loud crash definitely caught Esmeralda's attention. He tried to catch himself, but it didn't go well. He hit the floor hard, and to make it worse, he broke one of the cauldron's handles on the way down. When Esmeralda saw the damage, she wasn't thrilled. Standing behind him, she looked serious. He panicked and offered to get a new one, thinking maybe she couldn't use it anymore, but she cut him off fast. She said she didn't need a replacement, and even if she used magic to fix it, it just wouldn't be the same. He kept picking up the broken bits trying to explain, but she told him to stop and held him still. Quietly, she admitted that she probably shouldn't have asked him to do it in the first place. Now she needed to take care of him. He had no idea what she meant by that and honestly thought this might be the end for him. But instead of anything scary, she gently picked him up and carried him to his room. Confused and blushing, he asked what she was doing, but she told him to behave since he was hurt. He hadn't even realized he was injured, he'd been too focused on the cauldron. Still, he figured the cauldron mattered more, but she disagreed and casually burned it away with magic. She told him it wasn't important anymore, she could always make another one. That made him feel a little better, even if his voice still shook. She helped him lie down and told him to rest. As she leaned in, he blushed again, not knowing what to expect. When he asked her about it, she explained she was using a spell to take the pain away. He insisted he wasn't hurting, but she didn't listen. She told him to stay still, but having her that close made it nearly impossible for him to relax. Once she finished, she suggested he take it easy for the rest of the day. On her way out, he apologized for messing things up, but she just smiled and said he didn't need to feel bad, he just needed to be more cautious next time. He couldn't quite figure out why she was being so nice about everything. After leaving the room, her serious look faded into a soft, pleased smile. The idea of him sleeping in her bed was kind of surreal. Honestly, it made her a little flustered. No matter how much she tried to play it cool, she couldn't help but feel giddy. She even got so caught up in her own thoughts that she tripped and landed flat on the floor. Both of them ended up lying in bed, but only one of them seemed confused. The boy quietly asked what just happened, but she didn't reply, probably too embarrassed to admit she'd fallen over just because she thought he looked too cute. Having a witch as a teacher wasn't exactly normal, especially when she acted so nice and mysterious. It made him constantly wonder what was going on in her head. As her student, Hinata couldn't help but want to understand her better. While playing around with a stream of water, Esmeralda casually asked if something was on his mind or if he had questions. That snapped him out of his thoughts, and he asked how she'd made the water move like a snake. She quickly corrected him. It wasn't a snake, it was supposed to be a dragon. Then she sat him in front of a glass of water and told him to give it a try. She explained that controlling water needed a calm mind without overthinking it, which was clearly the opposite of what Hinata was doing. Noticing how distracted he was, she tried to bring his focus back, but his brain was somewhere else entirely. All he could think about was how close they were sitting, which wasn't helping. She kept pressing, wanting to know what the problem was, but truthfully, he couldn't concentrate with her that near. Totally overwhelmed, he accidentally made the water splash everywhere, including on her clothes. She gave him a quick scolding while he panicked, trying to find something to dry her off. Even her legs were soaked. As she wrung out her dress, she gave him a little lecture about not listening properly. Handing him a cloth, she told him to dry her legs, and he nodded, doing his best not to make things weirder by staring at her too much. He quietly nodded while helping dry her off, and the kid tried his best not to look at her face too much, but she caught him anyway and told him to focus properly. Even her hair was soaked after what had just happened, and she started grumbling about how she might catch a cold like that. The boy, trying to be helpful, reached up to dry her hair, but since she was super tall, it wasn't really working. In all that effort, he slipped on a wet patch on the floor. Instinctively, he reached out to avoid falling and accidentally grabbed onto her right between the legs. It wasn't on purpose, but it still made him flush with embarrassment. Even she turned red when she realized where his hands had ended up. He got so flustered that the sink went haywire, water spraying everywhere like it had a mind of its own. Seeing the mess, he tried to calm himself, repeating in his head that panicking would only make it worse. When he finally got the water under control, the whole place looked like a disaster zone. She was completely soaked, and he nervously asked if she was okay. She was clearly annoyed, but instead of yelling, she just looked at him and said it was super embarrassing. She teased him, calling him a little perv, and then walked closer, saying he was a naughty one. While holding him, she mentioned how staying wet like that wasn't good, and they should probably change. Feeling the sudden closeness, he froze and awkwardly asked her to wait, especially because of where her hand was resting. She seemed surprised and asked if he didn't want to hug her because she was a witch, or if he thought she was too tall and weird-looking. He tried to explain that she was just acting a little off. He told her she was actually cool and really interesting, but she explained that he'd only seen one version of her so far. She started showering him with affection like she wanted to prove there were different sides of her. But when he didn't really respond, she wondered if maybe a change of outfit would make a difference. He quickly told her that wasn't the case at all. She was a bit confused. After all, wasn't it him who started all this, even if by accident? Then she asked something that threw him off, whether little accidents made things easier. Out of nowhere, she slipped and ended up falling on him. But this time he wasn't clueless, he had a good idea of what was going on. She asked what more she had to do to keep him from running away, but instead of answering, he gently put her hat back on her head and stepped away. Just like that, it was like everything flipped back to normal. She seemed puzzled, unsure why she'd stopped in the middle of their training. He asked her if she really didn't realize what just happened. She explained that her hat helped control some strong magic inside her, so not wearing it could be risky. Worried, she asked if she had accidentally hurt him, but he reassured her that everything was fine, just intense. Breaking the awkward silence, the boy smiled and called her master, saying she'd always be amazing in his eyes. She blushed a little, thanked him, and quickly moved on to avoid the awkwardness. She told him to flip open the magic book to page 12, completely unaware of what had happened to her clothes. When he didn't respond right away, she asked what was wrong. He covered his eyes, hinting at the wardrobe issue because his teacher was definitely beautiful. He had bought materials for a potion she had requested, 3 bags of lizard tail, some elven sesame, and oak slivers. He told her he'd clean the shelves after they finished, and also mentioned he'd prepared coffee for her. But he was tired and still had to go out later. Noticing how worn out he looked, the witch handed him a glass of water. Grateful, he thanked her until he realized it wasn't water. He spat it out, surprised by the bitter taste, and demanded to know what he had just drunk. Esmeralda calmly explained that she wanted to test the effects of a potion she had made. He quickly begged her not to use him as a test subject. After tasting her coffee, he thought it was too sweet and childish for his taste, not liking anything sugary. Feeling a bit offended, he decided to try the potion again to please her. Noticing his willingness, the witch promised a better way to drink the potion without the discomfort. His curiosity grew, and he asked if there was some magic to make it taste better. But that wasn't her plan. She pulled him closer and asked him to open his mouth, holding a spoonful of the bitter liquid. Hinata, startled by her sudden move, asked what she was doing. She showed him a book that explained this method of taking medicine, telling him she was copying it. He pointed out that it was meant for babies, but she argued that anyone under a certain age was like a baby to her. With a hopeful smile, she promised him a delicious ice cream if he drank the potion. He tried to resist, but in the end he gave in and opened his mouth. As she fed him spoonful by spoonful, she encouraged him, praising him for being so good. Apparently, the technique was working just like the book said it would. She asked Hinata if he'd like to do this more often, but he grumbled that the experience hadn't been enjoyable. Esmeralda picked him up in her arms and teased him, asking if he was upset, though it didn't seem like it. He laughed as she spun him around and set him back at the study bench. He complained about being treated like a child again, but tried to focus on the potion he had just taken. It was supposed to be a recovery potion after all. He had no time to dwell on it. He needed to find the shopping list for the other things he had to buy. However, he got distracted when he realized he didn't feel tired at all, unlike the previous day when he had returned from shopping. The next day, his tutor encouraged him not to hold back, to push himself a little further. He was close, just a bit more, and he'd finally be able to summon it. And with a burst of effort, he did. It was a small ball of fire. The witch raised an eyebrow and asked if that was all he could do. Hinata defended himself, explaining that fire magic wasn't easy to master. She concluded that maybe he wasn't ready for enchantments yet, which frustrated him. All he wanted was to learn how to use magic, and he was willing to put in the effort. Esmeralda was confused by his reasons and asked him what motivated him. He admitted it felt really cool to use fire magic, like being able to threaten someone by saying he'd burn them if they tried anything against him. The witch frowned. His reasoning seemed so shallow. Magic was something much more sacred, not just a tool for intimidation. But Hinata pushed back, saying he wanted to look as cool as she did in front of others. Esmeralda replied that she never showed her magic to anyone, and it wasn't something he should want to be proud of. In fact, it made her unhappy. She had seen powerful flames from her opponents before, some so close they nearly burned her alive. Those encounters were nothing like the fun magic tricks he was imagining. Ignoring all of his master's advice, Hinata insisted he needed to master fire magic once and for all. Esmeralda told him not to overdo it though, that too much effort could be harmful. Her close presence made it hard for him to focus, and she asked if he could feel the magic stirring. But she warned him that if he couldn't control it, it was still too early for him to try. Squeezing him into a hug, Esmeralda tried to help him relax, telling him not to be so immature. She explained that fire magic relied on emotions and must always be summoned with intention, no matter who was watching. Excited, Hinata admitted that even though he didn't have a clear intention yet, he was serious about his magic. His main goal was to show her what he could do because he wanted to look cool in front of the person he liked. At that moment, his words caught her off guard and her face turned red. What did he mean by liking her? The intense feeling caused Hinata's hands to burst with fiery magic. He had finally done it, and all because he thought about his master. Proud, he asked for her opinion. Esmeralda, though her hat was surrounded by flames, simply replied that it wasn't anything special. Hinata thanked her even though she hadn't said much. Later, as he reviewed a potion recipe, he noticed he had to stir mandrake root and unicorn horn powder in a clockwise direction. Esmeralda, seeing him deep in thought, asked if he was working on the recovery potion. He nodded, and since everything seemed under control, she offered to help if he had any questions. But she decided to observe from a distance. It didn't take long for things to spiral out of control, prompting her to step in. While the boy was lost in thought, probably trying to figure out what might have gone wrong, the other two just kept watching quietly, kind of waiting for him to say something. But the silence was getting weird. The woman felt uneasy. Why wasn't he asking questions? Was he still scared of her? She thought they were past all that. It didn't feel right, and she knew just standing around wasn't going to fix anything. Without a word, she snapped her fingers, and suddenly they were somewhere completely different, a classroom. The blonde boy blinked and realized he was now wearing a school uniform, sitting at a desk. It took him a second to understand that they were back in the magic school where he used to study. His confusion doubled when he saw Esmeralda, also dressed like a student, standing in front of him. She dragged over a chair and sat down beside him, explaining that she had used her magic to bring his subconscious into reality. It was her way of figuring out what was getting in the way of his progress in magic. That actually made more sense than assuming she was just into dressing up for fun, which she definitely wasn't. She told him not to call her master. Here they were classmates now, apparently. Curious, she asked what others used to call him in school. Just Canada, he replied, like always. That sounded super plain to her, and when she tried to come up with something more fun, he quickly asked her not to use any nicknames. She told him how hard she had worked to become a witch, even earning the nickname Pale and Gloomy Black Cloak, which honestly sounded more like people teasing her than praising her. The place brought back old memories for the boy. He remembered a beginner's potion test he had flunked, which had even landed him in detention. That made Esmeralda wonder why none of his friends had helped him. His mind jumped to that moment when his potion exploded in class. What stuck with him the most wasn't the failure, it was how everyone had something harsh to say about him being the only one who messed it up. He brushed it off, saying he was just a loser. Then the school bell rang for break. Esmeralda struck a dramatic pose and told him to go get her some yakisoba. He gave her a look, clearly not thrilled, and pointed out how this wasn't exactly equal treatment between classmates. She looked genuinely confused. She thought this was how human school life worked. He mumbled that he didn't like this version of society. She just shrugged and reminded him she'd gone to school centuries ago, so her info might be a bit outdated. That left him speechless. She then argued that talking about failures was a kind of learning too, even if it felt shameless. But to her, it still had value. She looked him in the eye and told him that no one here would laugh at him. That seemed to finally break the tension. Before she left to buy food for herself, she asked if he wanted anything. He nodded and rattled off a ridiculously long snack list, which made her wonder if this is how things felt when the tables were turned. Then, a little awkwardly, he asked for one more thing, help with an activity question. That caught her off guard, but all he wanted was a bit of guidance. It made her blush a little, and she agreed without hesitation. After loading up on snacks, they both felt like crashing for a nap. But the peaceful vibe didn't last. They were back in reality, this time in a forest. The boy immediately tensed up, warning that monsters might be nearby. He was so on edge that when a small bunny-like creature jumped out of the bushes, he let out a full-on scream. Esmeralda couldn't help but think that was kind of pathetic. With full confidence, she said that a true magician never gives up their pride. And for someone like him who was still super shaky, some hardcore training was absolutely necessary. Just hearing the word training made the boy freeze up. When he saw the dark cave packed with creatures, he looked at her like, "Wait, we're actually going in there?" She nodded without hesitation. They were going to walk all the way through and come back. She even tried to calm him down by saying she had handpicked the monsters inside, so they wouldn't be dangerous. Yeah, right? The moment zombies started crawling out of the cave, she let out a scream and jumped into the boy's arms. A second later, she acted like nothing had happened, saying there was nothing to be afraid of and that he looked silly for clinging to her. But she was the one doing exactly that. Even though she tried to act chill, her heart was beating loud enough for him to hear it. She had planned the whole scene herself, but clearly wasn't a fan of what she'd created. She held onto his hand tight, scared out of her mind, and quietly asked him not to let go. Apparently, things were only going to get worse. That whole situation flipped something in him. He suddenly wanted to protect her, no matter how terrified he was. He nervously mentioned how dark it was and accidentally let go of her hand. Trying to fix it, he reached out to grab her again, but what he touched wasn't her, because her voice came from behind him. Yeah, he'd just grabbed a monster. The thing standing in front of him was huge, absolutely massive, and according to Esmeralda, it wasn't one of hers, so that meant it was a real wild monster. His brain basically shut down when it lunged at him, but before it could get too close, the witch stepped in, standing between them like she wasn't even scared anymore. It was a gargoyle, one of the top predators in that area, and not something that had to worry about enemies. Still, she gave it a taste of her power and made it very clear that if it even thought about touching her student, it'd regret it. The monster backed off, recognizing it was outmatched. Once the danger passed, she turned to the boy and admitted she didn't mean for things to go that far. She hadn't expected that thing to show up. The boy looked at her, held her hands, and with serious eyes told her that next time he'd be the one protecting her. Maybe he wasn't strong enough now, but he was going to change that. He'd keep getting stronger. That promise hit her right in the heart. She blushed and, without thinking twice, pulled him into a hug, calling him adorable and praising him like crazy. He turned red from embarrassment, especially since all the monsters nearby were staring like it was some kind of stage performance. Later, while she was waiting for him to show up for a new lesson, she noticed he was super late. Disappointed, she figured he probably wasn't coming. But then he showed up, completely casual and totally covered in fish. Confused, she asked why he looked like that. He acted like it was no big deal and explained he'd forgotten to put on monster repellent, so yeah, he got attacked. Still, the route he took sounded ridiculous through Spike Mountain, skipping over magma zones and crossing a monster-filled river on a raft. Honestly, the fact that he even made it was kind of impressive. Of course, she couldn't help but point out that if he'd just flown on a broom, it would have taken a few minutes. But no, he was still scared of flying too far. That gave her an idea. If she wanted to keep him safe, she'd have to teach him how to fly properly. And that's what they did. Each of them got on a broom. The boy was terrified of falling, and even though she stayed close to keep him safe, he only lasted a short while before begging to stop. But she didn't let up, telling him to stop whining so much. Somehow, her tough love approach worked, and he seemed way more fired up to keep going. While Esmeralda kept a close eye on him, the boy actually started enjoying the flight after a while. Meanwhile, she looked like a mess every time he showed even a hint of doubt. Eventually, she had to stop, said she couldn't keep up if she was going to be panicking over his safety the whole time. So he landed, and they moved on to the next part of his training, teleportation. Sounded simple enough on paper. First, she asked him to try appearing right in front of her, but not too far away. He seemed really focused, determined to get it right. Drawing a magic circle, he gave it a shot, and somehow it actually worked. Problem was, he didn't exactly nail the landing. Turned out he had teleported a little too close, so close that he was now tangled up in her dress. Yeah, not his best moment. Later, back at the mansion, the boy tried to apologize for the whole awkward teleport incident, but Esmeralda seemed unfazed. She explained that there really wasn't any easy way around this stuff. If they were going to continue, she needed to prepare herself too. It was just one of those things. Her serious tone made the boy wonder what kind of magic they were about to do. That silence of his made her ask if he even understood what she meant. After all, if even she had to prepare, this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Out of nowhere, space around them started warping, which instantly freaked him out. She told him not to move a muscle. If he did, he could end up stuck in some never-ending loop of magical nonsense. Chaos hit hard and he reacted the only way he could, by screaming. Then bam, he hit the ground. Hard. Dazed, he looked around, trying to make sense of where he'd ended up. It wasn't the same room as before. He scanned the place, trying to figure out whose room this even was, or if the teleport had actually worked. Since Esmeralda's mansion was just outside the window, it was weird that he'd never seen this room before. His confusion didn't last long. Esmeralda's voice echoed through the room, telling him it was a new space she had created just for him. That only left him more puzzled. She tried to explain further, casually suggesting they live there together. That idea hit him like a truck. He stared at her in total silence, unsure if he'd heard her right. The lack of a response made her second-guess everything. Maybe she'd said it weirdly. Trying to fix the mood, she quickly told him not to feel obligated. But he looked down, cheeks turning red, and quietly said he was actually really happy with the offer, and if she didn't mind, he'd love to stay. That answer hit her harder than expected. She was so overwhelmed, she fainted right on the spot. Clearly, she wasn't ready for that response. As he started checking out the mansion, one thing that blew his mind was the bathroom. It was huge, way bigger than he was used to, and his whole family seemed super chill in there. Still, it was surreal sharing a house with his master now. While taking a shower, he couldn't help but think about how much he'd learn from now on, but his thoughts kept circling back to the bathroom for some reason. He got distracted by the sound of Esmeralda's footsteps. On the other side of the wall, she was showering too, and somehow making a full show out of it. Curious, he peeked just a little and caught a glimpse of her being her true self. She was busy messing around with soap bubbles, making mustaches, unicorn horns, even little cloud hats. She was so into it that she completely forgot about everything else. He figured maybe this was a good time to quietly slip away. But that plan backfired fast when something brushed against his back, a leaf of all things, and he screamed without thinking. That scream drew Esmeralda's attention, snapping her out of whatever bubble party she was having. And just like that, their little quiet moment turned into chaos again. Hearing the sound, the woman asked if it was Alurin and casually told her friend to help wash her back like usual. But Hinata, realizing what was going on, tried to pull away, quietly pleading to be let off the hook. Esmeralda, still with her eyes shut, asked if everything was okay on the other side. It felt like this was it. She was going to figure out who was really there, and it was probably not going to go well. So the boy just followed instructions, scrubbing his teacher's back, hoping she wouldn't notice something was off. But she did. Something about the way he touched her felt different. Esmeralda grabbed his hand and asked what was going on. Then, while guiding him, she told him to scrub a bit harder. At this point, all Hinata could think about was how to get out without being noticed. As she washed her face, the sorceress started chatting, saying she had something to share and asking if the girl didn't think the house felt a bit too empty for one person. She admitted she'd always dreamed of having someone by her side. Meanwhile, Hinata wasn't paying much attention. His eyes were locked on the mirror, which clearly showed both of them standing there. Then Esmeralda raised her head and wrapped up her thoughts by saying she had finally found someone. But right after, she looked up and saw him. Her eyes widened. She screamed, shocked, demanding to know what he was doing there. He panicked, quickly trying to explain that he didn't realize she'd come in after him. After taking a breath, the witch waved it off, saying it was fine now that they were living together. Stuff like this was bound to happen. Once things cooled down, Anna teased him, saying his face was already red even before stepping into the hot water. He tried to deny it but slipped and fell, which honestly saved him from having to explain the real reason behind the blush. Later, while she was trying to relax on the lounge chair, her piece got cut short by Hinata. He came over, checked on her, said sorry for not visiting sooner, and handed her a glass of water. She told him not to worry about that. What she really wanted to know was how much he saw, since she'd never shown that side of herself to anyone before. He told her she looked really cute and that seeing her playful side actually made him happy. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she yanked his towel, saying now it was his turn to show something new. He let out a scream, totally confused, while Alurin watched in the background, not sure what was going on. Soon after, heavy rain started pouring down and the house cat freaked out. Hinata bent down, trying to calm the little guy, wondering what had scared it so much. He called out to Esmeralda, mentioning that Pepero wasn't eating. That's when he found her hiding under a table. His voice startled her and she banged her head against it. Seeing her like that, Hinata asked what she was doing. When she looked up and saw his face, she relaxed, realizing it was just him. It felt kind of weird to him, but then she asked if he didn't feel a strange magical energy nearby, because her master was coming. Just thinking about her teacher gave Hinata the chills. He couldn't even imagine what kind of witch could make Esmeralda nervous. All of a sudden, the mansion's candles went out on their own. Esmeralda quietly said her master had arrived. Then, as if on cue, magical books slowly rose from the ground. They both stared at one of them until Hinata broke the silence, asking where the master was. That's when the book suddenly responded, saying its name was Krista Leon. While talking, Krista mentioned she'd heard some whispers about Esmeralda's new student. She went on saying that if he wanted to be part of her family, there was no way around it, he'd have to take an oath. But honestly, Hinata wasn't even listening properly. His mind was stuck on one thing: how was a book even talking? Apparently that book was actually his teacher's master. Krista didn't waste time. She started rattling off facts about him, like his height, favorite food, even the last time he wet the bed. It left Hinata completely frozen. She said she could do all that because she was the supreme witch. Thanks to a special demon eye, she could learn everything about someone with just a single glance, though it had cost her one of her real eyes to get that power. As the book flipped open, it brought up something serious. Hinata, being just a regular human, wouldn't be much help unless he made. If he wanted to do anything worthwhile, he'd have to make a deal with a witch. There was even this creepy contract asking would he trade an arm, a leg, an eye? The pressure was building, especially when they heard Esmeralda's footsteps getting closer. She showed up and was greeted kindly by her mistress, but she looked like she was seething inside. Before she could even react, she just froze. Looked like pure fear had locked her in place. Krista said it was probably because she felt the insane power difference between them, like the fear had paralyzed her. Hinata couldn't believe this new witch had such intense power that even her own teacher was terrified. Trying to calm things down, the supreme witch told her pupil everything would be fine. She just had to follow the rules and listen to whatever the great witch said. Esmeralda tried to move, lifted her foot, but it landed right back where it started. Watching it was kind of painful. It looked like she was struggling just to move. The book, though, it was kind of enjoying the drama. Esmeralda suddenly said that no matter what, if Krista tried to hurt the boy, she wouldn't hold back. She didn't even care if it got her kicked out. That boldness caught Krista off guard, left her completely speechless. Then Hinata, all serious, said he didn't want to see his mentor get hurt and had already decided to be her disciple. Krista laughed a little at how clueless he was about what his teacher could actually do, but she also noticed he was genuinely worried. Bit of a scaredy cat maybe, but still loyal. Out of nowhere, the demon eye flashed like crazy and the book just fell. Behind it, a tiny witch with a pointy hat covering her mouth like she'd been caught doing something sneaky. Krista got curious and asked what kind of bond Hinata and Esmeralda had, but the boy couldn't stop thinking about the tiny person hiding behind the book. Krista tried to circle back, saying that kind of relationship between a witch and a human wasn't really allowed. Esmeralda half joked that it was probably something super bad. But then, instead of getting mad, Krista's eyes lit up. She suddenly loved the idea. Like, imagine a forbidden romance, a lonely little witch and a broken human falling in love out of nowhere. That kind of dramatic story. She was all in. It was so romantic, even the tiny witch teared up a bit. Hinata looked confused and asked what was going on, but his friend was already used to all the weirdness. She loved teasing Esmeralda, who pretended to be offended like always. But when she stood up, she freaked out. Hinata was standing right there holding her hand. So yeah, things were definitely heading in that direction, like some wild teen romance. Krista didn't even try to hide how hyped she was. She'd already picked Hinata as her new favorite and even gave their ship a name, Esmahina. Classic. That happiness didn't last long though, since Krista only let her emotions run wild when the demon eye wasn't active. Eventually, all three of them sat down for a meal. Esmeralda asked how the food was, and Hinata, without missing a beat, said it was amazing just like always. The Supreme Witch casually said the food was good and held out her bowl for seconds. It felt a little odd having a third person sitting with them now. Hinata hadn't even realized she was there and greeted her a bit late. The brunette raised an eyebrow, asking what she was doing there. With a smirk, the tiny one said it was normal for families to eat together. Esmeralda wasn't having it. If the little witch was just there to crack jokes, she could leave and fast. The two traded snarky nicknames before parting ways. Before going, the blonde asked Esmeralda if she was okay with pretending all the time. At first, she didn't get it, so the girl clarified she was talking about her feelings. Apparently, the brunette had changed the flavor of Hanada's drink without him even noticing. Her face turned red and she tried to brush it off like it was nothing, but Krista wasn't fooled. She didn't even need her demon eye to know what was really going on. Krista, trying to be supportive, flipped through her spellbook to find some magical outfits that could express the girl's emotions. Esmeralda thanked her but said there weren't any personal feelings involved, they were just a mentor and her student. Krista smiled politely, even if she clearly didn't buy it. Soon after, Esmeralda apologized for making them wait and served Hanada his food. He was surprised she remembered that he'd once mentioned how much he liked that dish. But what really caught him off guard was how different she looked that day, new clothes, completely transformed. He couldn't help but blush. When he complimented her, she smiled, admitting she'd used a bit of magic for the outfit. Then shyly she asked how she looked, worried it might seem weird. But Hanada's eyes lit up. He said she looked absolutely beautiful. She got all flustered hearing that, but the moment was kind of sweet. And when he said he wanted to learn how to make clothes with magic like she did, she didn't really say much. Witches were amazing to him and he was eager to learn. But instead of getting the excited reaction he hoped for, Esmeralda kind of shut down. The brunette just lowered herself quietly to the floor. Krista sat beside her, comforting her a little. She explained how younger people sometimes confuse their emotions and don't know exactly what they're feeling. When she gently suggested Esmeralda try being a bit more upfront about things, the Great Witch was basically asked to leave. Back in her usual clothes, Esmeralda seemed more serious. She told herself to drop all those feelings and just focus on teaching. She even thanked Krista, saying the whole thing helped her realize it was all just a big mix-up in her head. When Hanada tried to speak to her again, she suddenly cut him off and announced that training was starting right now. He needed to be ready. Then, out of nowhere, a cute little ribbon clip appeared in her hair. It was Hanada's doing the best he could manage with his current skills. He told her he really wanted to learn how to make magical clothes too someday, and that she looked amazing in her outfit. Krista, ignoring all the awkward energy, asked if she could just stay with them from now on. Esmeralda said yes. During another meal, Krista randomly started listing all the stuff she liked and didn't like. Onions were a no, pudding was a yes. Esmeralda immediately regretted letting her stay. Later on, during training, Esmeralda was trying to teach Hanada how to use magic to create art. She told him he had to move the brush like he meant it. Hanada glanced at the brush and asked if he'd accidentally walked into an art class instead of magic training. Still, he kind of liked it. It felt like a nice break from all the usual stuff. She heard him and smiled, asking who said this wasn't part of magic. The whole mood shifted when a dragon began to materialize from the canvas Esmeralda was painting. It spiraled around Hanada, who jumped back in shock. Esmeralda explained that drawings created with magical ink could come to life and be controlled. Now it was Hanada's turn to try, and with a sheet of paper in front of him, he tried to summon a thunder dragon. Unfortunately, the result was more of a chaotic mess than a dragon. Esmeralda observed the floating disaster and decided that before jumping into magic, Hanada needed to improve his basic art skills. She asked him what his favorite subject was, believing that would help him get better faster. Hanada responded that it was witches, which at least was convenient for their current situation. Out of nowhere, Krista appeared and pushed Esmeralda into position to be Hanada's live model. She posed following Krista's instructions until she struck her final pose. But Hanada still felt something was missing from the scene. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, so Esmeralda pulled out her spellbook and cast an enchantment on Krista. The magic made her revert to a more natural, powerful state, showing her at her full potential. Esmeralda, confused, asked Krista what she was doing. Krista explained that this was the best way to sketch a body. Plus, it gave Hanada a chance to see Esmeralda in a different light. Hanada, flustered, tried to object, but Krista cut him off, telling him that if he wanted to learn, he needed to adapt. She made a dramatic speech about how much Esmeralda had done for him, and how absurd it would be if he bailed now. In an attempt to end the awkwardness, Esmeralda sighed and told Hanada to just paint her. She assured him that she was only in that pose for educational purposes, so there was no reason to be embarrassed. She moved even closer, explaining that he wouldn't be able to draw her properly unless he looked at her carefully. But this only made it harder for Hanada to concentrate. From behind, Krista urged him to push through, and when he did, he accidentally knocked Hanada to the ground. But Esmeralda didn't step back. Instead, she moved even closer and said that the best way to learn structure was through touch. She told him not to hold back since she was there to help him. Hanada's heart raced and his face burned. Unable to handle the situation, he quickly pulled away, explaining that this wasn't what he wanted to paint. Esmeralda, frustrated and a bit tearful, asked if he wasn't interested in her. Her voice wavered and her feelings were clearly hurt, but her former mistress tried to cheer her up. As he calmed down, Hinata started talking about the witch he actually wanted to paint. He described her as intelligent, powerful, kind, and cool, exactly how he saw her every day. This was the version of her he wanted to capture, not the enchanted one. He continued, shaping his vision of Esmeralda until she posed again, now completely still. Krista simply observed quietly as Hinata focused. Finally, when the drawing was done, Hinata presented it to Esmeralda. She asked to see it, but when she looked at the drawing, it looked like something a 5-year-old might have made. Hinata blushed, realizing that art wasn't really his forte. He apologized, then asked if Esmeralda could teach him another type of magic instead. She agreed that a different approach would probably be better. The next day, while Hinata was playing with the cat, he had fun petting its fluffy belly. But Esmeralda scolded the cat for jumping on the table while she was mixing potions. When she tried to push the cat off, it leapt back onto her, causing her to stumble and drop the potion she was working on. Esmeralda was focused on the potion she had been working on, but Hinata was more concerned about the glass shards scattered on the floor. As the potion spread, it released a thick cloud of smoke that slowly faded, leaving the boy checking on Pepandero. But as he looked, something strange happened. The cat's pointed ears had transformed into human ones. This left Hinata utterly confused about what he was feeling. The now human Catwoman rubbed against him, saying that since he had always taken care of her, she owed him her love. Hinata had no idea what that meant though, and Krista, seeing the chaos, quickly analyzed the potion. She concluded that it was a mutation liquid that caused transformations, explaining that Pepandero had temporarily become human. The transformed Catwoman, now fascinated with her new human form, seemed intent on thanking Hinata by getting close to him, but he was trying to push her away as usual. The awkwardness was compounded when she leaned in, causing Hinata to blush deeply. He asked Krista what he should do, but she explained there was no antidote, and they would simply return to their original forms gradually. With that, she decided to take a nap while they waited. As the situation settled, Hinata's attention turned to Esmeralda, who was in her original form, but something seemed off. She had cat ears peeking out from under her hat, and when he tried to speak to her, she could only respond with meows. It wasn't just the cat who was affected by the potion. Esmeralda was also in a strange state. Hinata realized the situation had taken an unexpected turn, especially when Esmeralda, now in her cat form, innocently climbed on top of him like a kitten, though this kitten was nearly 5-7 inches tall. Pepandero, now back in her cat form, scolded Esmeralda for trying to crush Hinata. She even joked that he would be much better off with someone small and cute like her. This infuriated Esmeralda, and the two began a playful tug-of-war over Hinata's affection, almost suffocating him with their cuddles. In the chaos, he ordered both of them to stop, only for Pepandero to tease him, asking if he'd ever stroked a woman's chin or paws. Exhausted, Hinata tried to separate them by grabbing both girls by their necks, but the act turned into mutual chin scratches, which only made them even more affectionate. Eventually, the situation calmed down. Pepandero returned to her cat form, curling up to sleep in Hinata's lap, while he kept scratching Esmeralda's chin, noticing that she still hadn't fully returned to normal. He remembered what the Catwoman had said about showing affection if he truly liked Esmeralda, and feeling sincere, Hinata gave her a tight hug, whispering that his mistress was very big and adorable. This seemed to snap Esmeralda out of the trance, but she didn't show it. Hinata, confused, wondered why it was taking her so long to return to normal, but only Esmeralda and Krista knew the truth. Later, Krista sent Hinata to a witches' convention. When they arrived, Esmeralda mentioned it had been a long time since she had attended one. Seeing Hinata excited, she questioned what was so thrilling about it, to which he replied that, since it was a gathering of witches, he expected to meet incredible sorceresses. This answer annoyed her, and she warned him not to let his guard down, especially since conventions often started with a ritual to worship the Dark Lord. She reminded him that, if anyone discovered he was human, it could cause trouble, so he needed to be careful. However, as soon as Esmeralda lost sight of Hinata for a moment, he had already confirmed his human identity at the reception desk. Two little witches intercepted him, claiming that someone suspicious needed to be searched. As Hinata was pulled into a room by one of the reception witches, he was quickly surrounded by a group of witches who were eager to figure out what to do with him. They seemed excited by the prospect of having a human in their midst, speculating on how they could use him for their own purposes. One witch suggested offering him as a sacrifice to the Dark Lord, while another complained about how hard the magical playing card game they were playing was. Their carefree attitude earned them a scolding for playing cards during work hours, as their only job was to handle event logistics which had already been set up. With Hanada's arrival, they saw an opportunity to entertain themselves by punishing him, eager to observe and test a human. The receptionist witch was particularly curious and asked Hanada to be honest about his reasons for being at the event. Hanada, unbothered, explained that he had been invited by Krista and that he was passionate about witches, which led him to become an apprentice. He took the chance to introduce himself properly. When the witches heard his name, their eyes widened. They had heard about a witch's apprentice like him in stories. One of them even questioned whether he was real or just someone cosplaying as the character from the books. Nervous, Hanada could only wonder what they meant by a test. Before anything could happen, the door to the room burst open and Esmeralda stormed in. The scene she walked into was certainly unexpected. The witches were doting on Hanada, quoting lines from the book about how he liked older women to pamper him. Esmeralda couldn't help but feel a bit amused at the sight of Hanada's flushed face, but she quickly intervened, putting an end to their antics when they mentioned trying other tests on him. She grabbed Hanada possessively and declared that he was better off with her, reminding the witches that she was his one and only mistress. The witches were left speechless, surprised by the bold declaration. One of them realized they were indeed in the presence of Esmeralda, confirming that this was truly the mistress they had heard about. One witch even celebrated that they were meeting the real deal in person, while another began analyzing some small differences in Esmeralda's appearance compared to the descriptions in the books. They had plush dolls of both Esmeralda and Hanada and eagerly asked for autographs, treating them like celebrities. Esmeralda signed the dolls, but she couldn't help but question if these were really their plushies. Just then Krista, the supreme witch, appeared in the doorway. Her arrival made the main sorcerers question the nature of this convention. Krista casually explained that this was a convention she herself had sponsored with a special focus on authors. She revealed that this year they had brought works that included stories about her and Hanada's duo stories that were quite popular among the attendees. Hanada was shocked by the information, but Krista reassured him that the convention was essentially a fan gathering of sorts for the mistress and her human apprentice. Before he knew it, Hanada found himself surrounded by eager witches, all showering him with affection, commenting on his cuteness. Esmeralda, trying not to lose her mind, overheard other witches inviting him to be their apprentice, but Hanada, ever loyal, insisted that he was committed to his mistress. The witches, not deterred, promised to teach him any magic he desired, even offering him ice magic. Hanada's eyes sparkled at the thought, but the witches were becoming more insistent, crowding closer to him with compliments and affection. Even the three witches who had initially been alone with Hanada started to worry, realizing that their attempts to seduce him were causing him to drift too far from Esmeralda. Esmeralda, visibly struggling to contain her emotions, could only watch as the situation unfolded around her, wondering how much longer she could hold on to her apprentice in the face of so much attention. As Esmeralda dealt with the chaos at the convention, Hanada's refusal to be tempted by other witches' offers left a mark of loyalty on his heart. He explained to them that he couldn't just leave his mistress, as there was still too much magic to learn from her, and even though many witches tried to lure him away with promises of powerful teachings, his focus remained on Esmeralda. His heart raced just thinking about her magic, especially that one spell she had used when they first met, a magic that made him feel something he couldn't quite understand yet. The other witches, hearing his passionate words, didn't seem to take them seriously. They kept pressing him, one even trying to close the distance and make an advance. But as she approached, something strange happened. The moment she got close to Hanada, her arms froze solid. The same fate befell the other witches who had surrounded him, each of them trapped by various spells: wind, fire, and ice. The room fell into stunned silence as Esmeralda appeared, standing imposingly in the center of the chaos. With a calm but firm tone, she reminded everyone that she could teach any kind of magic by herself. Her presence alone sent the remaining witches fleeing in fear, leaving only her initial group standing there. Hanada, visibly relieved, approached his mentor, praising her magical talent. Esmeralda, in a rare moment of gentleness, knelt down to meet his gaze. The moment she leaned in to place a kiss on his cheek, the room went silent. Hanada, caught off guard, blushed deeply, his heart racing all over again. He was certain this magic was the same as when they first met, if not even more powerful. Hanada, unable to hold back, asked what kind of magic it was. Esmeralda hesitated, sensing that he wasn't quite ready to understand, but she promised him that one day, when the time was right, she would tell him. For now, all he needed to do was wait. With that, the convention carried on, and their new friends from the event eagerly joined in the festivities. As they enjoyed the rest of the day, the duo's merchandise, especially the book featuring their story, sold out in an instant. The video ended with a reminder for the viewers to subscribe and like if they didn't want to miss the next part of the journey. Hinata reminds himself of the time when he was a novice sorcerer, yearning to wield magic. He had become the feared witch's eyes, the one who was feared by all. As he lay on the ground with Esmeralda, she told him that he was about to learn the magic of force. In the circle they had formed, his power amplified in sync with his magical promises. Now, she asked him to test his strength. Hinata wondered about hurling his strength and what exactly he should aim at. She told him to simply aim at whoever was in front of him, meaning her. Then she hugged him, asking him to give it his all and crash into her. He was taken aback by this. Krista urged him to begin, and Esmeralda mentioned there was no need for a referee. Esmeralda unleashed Hinata's power, and he realized the incredible force could easily crush him. He felt he had reached his limit and begged his master to stop. She told him to squirm all he wanted. In her mind, she thought about the real plan. She had learned it from a book she had brought back from a witches' gathering. The book spoke of how someone could be overpowered by the one they loved, how being forcefully pinned down could make their heart race. She made Hinata lie down, positioning herself above him, and asked what he thought of it. He responded that he adored her. She thought to herself that he still couldn't tell the difference between his fascination with magic and genuine feelings of love. With this, she was determined to make him realize her affection. Her flawless plan was already set in motion. Then, she told him that she liked him as well. She applied so much pressure that he was forced into the ground, and when she got up, surprised, she realized she had used too much strength. Krista commented that it was all in her hands now, and the finishing move had been perfect. Esmeralda checked on Hinata, asking if he was fine, as the magic had been lifted. He responded that he still wanted more, praising the power of a witch and asking for something even stronger. She wondered what kind of kink he had. Hinata, eager, pulled her into another hug and mentioned that he wouldn't lose now. She denied him, explaining that she had already undone the magic. In her thoughts, she found it endearing that Hinata was pushing so hard. He wasn't listening with all his might, and it was so adorable. He then declared that he wanted to beat her, and she wondered what he was doing, asking him to give up. He responded that if he didn't, he wouldn't grow strong enough to protect her. She thought that he wanted to follow through with the plan, but his bravery was both impossible and touching. He was about to say something more, and she wondered if he had finally realized that she was confronting her true feelings. He mentioned that his magic was working its charm. She thought to herself that it wasn't quite like that, but then he asked if they could keep going. As he moved, he became tangled in his own actions, and she ended up falling, with him sitting on top of her. He asked that what did she think. She thought to herself that she loved him, but instead, she ended up being schooled by him. Afterward, he stood up, and taking the trophy from Krista, he asked if she had seen that he was also capable of doing something like that. Krista simply watched as he lay down beside her, wondering why things still weren't over yet. Esmeralda made Hinata sit on a broom as it flew, instructing him that all he had to do was focus on floating in place. He managed to do it for 50 seconds, a challenge that even the youngest students in the magic school could handle. Now, she told him to try for another 30 seconds. He was shaking as he sat, but finally, on the 78th second, he called it quits. Esmeralda thought to herself that he was now ready to take on more challenges, though he still lacked any real magical talent. Hinata remarked that he had managed to add 2 more seconds compared to before, but Esmeralda thought his performance was below the level of a magic kindergarten student. Despite this, she saw potential in him. She realized that having a disciple like him brought so much opportunity for growth, and it was thrilling to brainstorm lessons for him. Gone were the days when she only had her familiar to work with, sacrificing sleep for creativity. Yet, she couldn't help but feel a bit worn out. Maybe she'd gotten carried away. Seeing her exhausted expression, Hinata asked if they could take a small break. He suggested that she didn't always have to be on her toes, and that she seemed a bit tired herself. Esmeralda pinched his cheeks, asking who he thought he was, acting so high and mighty. He should focus on his own issues. Hinata shrugged, replying that he couldn't help it. It was all just such a hassle. They entered the house. and Esmeralda couldn't help but think to herself that Hinata's progress was dreadfully slow. At that rate, he would never become a proper wizard. But if he didn't improve, could they really be together forever? She then asked him if he would just give up on being a wizard and stay with her forever. She quickly scolded herself for even thinking such a thing. She needed to come up with a better lesson plan. After all, it was the master's duty to shape a real disciple. As she made some notes, exhaustion took over, and she fell asleep while sitting there. The next morning, she woke up with a start and realized she was already late for class. When she went outside, she saw that Hinata was already practicing sitting on his broom. However, he had fallen off, and several injuries marked his body. As soon as he saw her, he got up to greet her, and she immediately asked what he was doing all by himself. He explained that he knew he needed to try harder, even though he realized his lack of talent. He didn't want to be a burden to her. Esmeralda called him a fool, scolding him for going off and doing whatever he pleased when she wasn't watching. She asked what would happen if he seriously hurt himself. She pulled him into a hug, assuring him to stay still as she used her healing magic to mend his wounds. She promised that she would make sure he became a full-fledged wizard, so he didn't need to worry about her and should focus on his own path. She asked him if he understood, all the while thinking to herself that his determination was only making her want to stay closer to him than ever. After that, Hinata helped her lie down and covered her with a blanket, ensuring she could get a bit more proper rest. She asked him not to brush off her concern like that. He replied that he wasn't worried at all and was actually enjoying what he was doing. Esmeralda sighed, telling him that he didn't get it at all. Afterward, Esmeralda took Hinata to see the wild dragons, and he seemed overjoyed to see them. She cautioned him not to get too excited, as it could be risky. Esmeralda thought to herself that the volcanic activity in the Drake Valley was booming, creating a hot spring paradise. Hinata asked if that meant the place was rumored to be run by dragons. She warned him not to venture in alone. The drakes were a rough, dangerous breed, descended from powerful dragon blood. She told him to stay on his toes, as they couldn't afford to be careless. Esmeralda reflected on her own reasons for risking such dangers to be there. Afterward, they entered a house and headed to the bath together. Esmeralda thought that with their two nearly naked bodies in the cramped little room, it was a marvelous setup to conjure such a situation without any hint of awkwardness. There was no doubt something was about to unfold. She asked if Hinata was okay, but when he entered, his breathing was already heavy. A new figure entered the room, saying that she was in a bit of a pickle, having her sauna used for such dubious reasons. Esmeralda asked who she was. The dragon welcomed them to the dragon sauna and introduced herself as Tina, the owner of the sauna and Drake's partner. She suggested that they leave the human kid behind, adding that he would make a fine lunch for her. Esmeralda was taken aback by Tina's words, and Tina asked if she was trembling in fear of a drake. Esmeralda replied that she couldn't stand lizards. Tina, clearly angered, demanded to know who Esmeralda was calling a lizard. She then hugged Hinata tightly and introduced herself as a fire drake, a descendant of the noble dragon lineage. She explained that the sauna was a trap designed to lure unsuspecting humans. Drakes had a taste for tender human flesh, so Hinata would have to sit back and enjoy being steamed. Hinata grabbed her hand, firmly stating that it wasn't allowed. Esmeralda quickly assessed the situation and realized Tina was weak. She had expected a dangerous breed, but it seemed Tina wasn't as tough as she had thought. Tina, sensing the challenge, scowled and warned them not to underestimate her. This was where their luck runs out, she said before attacking with her fire powers. It's only going to get hotter from here. As a fire drake, she could withstand the heat, but they two were another story. She will smoke them both like a fine delicacy. She laughed maniacally, but after a while, Esmeralda and Hinata began to feel the heat intensify. Esmeralda, sweating and still holding strong, asked if they were both feeling the pressure, wondering if they were hitting their limits. Hinata, his voice strained, mentioned it was getting a bit too toasty. Esmeralda added that she was still in the game, unfazed. Tina's annoyance grew as she realized she wasn't going to break them that easily. Meanwhile, Esmeralda noticed that the water in the room was rapidly evaporating from every crack, the heat rising dangerously. Tina, now serious, declared that she wouldn't let this slide anymore. She never thought she'd have to use this technique. With that, she made her wings appear and told them it was too late for regrets. Scorching heat waves unleashed from her dragon wings as she activated her dragon storm. Hinata, surprisingly calm, commented that the warmth felt so good, and Esmeralda agreed, saying she too felt the heat. Tina, clearly a bit frustrated, remarked that the exercise was killer. Esmeralda and Hinata in unison told her it was all backfiring on her. As Tina fainted from exhaustion, they carefully carried her outside to sit on a bench in the sun. When Tina finally woke up, Hinata asked if she was okay, noting that she had been out cold for a while. Esmeralda responded that she was parched, and Hinata asked Tina if they had any drinks. The three of them shared a drink together, all agreeing that it was exactly what they needed. Hinata smiled and mentioned that it had been such a lovely experience, remarking on how amazing it was that Esmeralda could create such a wonderful place all by herself. Esmeralda nodded, admitting she couldn't help but agree with him. Tina also gave a smile, adding to the peaceful atmosphere. Esmeralda, however, couldn't help but wonder what had made her come there in the first place. Tina responded that she felt like she was forgetting something too. After a moment of thought, they both decided to just go with it. It seemed like the day was only getting better. Afterward, Esmeralda takes Hinata to the witching town of Lunara to buy some supplies. She thinks it's just an excuse, and the real goal was for them to go on a date and close the distance between them. As she's feeling happy, a witch approaches Hinata and asks if he wants to play with her. He replies that it sounds like fun. Just then, Esmeralda steps in, warning the witch not to hit on her apprentice. The witch recognizes Esmeralda and greets her, saying it's been a while. Esmeralda doesn't recognize her, but Hinata remembers her as the witch from the witch gathering, the seductive lewd witch gang that had tempted him. The witch then introduces herself as Melissa, the enchanting ice witch, and asks him to remember her name. Hinata, not wanting to be a difficult disciple, tries to downplay the situation, and Esmeralda quickly takes him away. However, Melissa remarks that it's all old news and pretends to trip, claiming her sandal strap has snapped. She asks Hinata to support her and help her to the nearby cafe. Esmeralda immediately calls out Melissa for cutting the strap with magic, pointing out that no one would fall for such an obvious act. Yet, when she looks over, she finds Hinata already escorting Melissa to the cafe. Esmeralda thinks to herself that Hinata truly was a dense and gullible soul. Melissa turns toward Esmeralda, smirking as she says that Esmeralda really made a fool of herself back then. With her enchanting magic skills, no man could resist her. Esmeralda, however, prepares to lend a hand and thinks she's going to take Hinata back. Melissa thanks her for the help, but in her mind, she's already certain she'll snatch Hinata away from her. They all sit down, and Melissa enjoys some ice cream, feeding some to Hinata as well. Hinata says it's really delicious, which only encourages Melissa to feed him more. Esmeralda, however, suspects the parfait has been enchanted with a charm spell. She resolves to keep a close eye on Hinata, making sure he doesn't look at anyone but her. She understands that Melissa was using magic that she truly fears, and yet, watching her beloved apprentice being charmed away by another woman fills Esmeralda with frustration. As she eats her own ice cream, it slips from her hand and falls. Melissa starts mocking her, saying it's a pitiful sight, and declares her victory over Esmeralda. To everyone's surprise, Hinata holds Esmeralda's hand, which shocks Melissa. Just by that simple touch, her charm magic was overwritten. Melissa wonders why they had to use such tricks and why they've never seen a face like his before. Realizing she's lost, she concedes defeat and tells Esmeralda she can have Hinata for the day. Melissa gets up to leave, and Hinata wonders where she's going. Esmeralda tells him that Melissa might be feeling unwell or something else. As Melissa walks away, she says she'll come back one day to take what's hers. Hinata then tells Esmeralda that she handled the situation well and that Melissa actually seemed like a pretty nice person. Melissa, however, thinks to herself that she's forgotten her sandal. Going back to grab it would be too embarrassing, so she decides to leave without it. Hinata and Esmeralda were in the garden, where she's pushing him, telling him not to whine after all this training. She reminds him that he's supposed to become a magnificent wizard. He agrees and tells himself to hold on. Esmeralda thinks it's time to start with some warm-up stretches, as today's lesson was all about exercise, and no magic allowed, for the sake of his health. She warns him that if he focuses too much on magic, his body will turn to jelly. She also reflects that witches can live long lives without breaking a sweat. Hinata, growing tired, suggests they stop, but Esmeralda, fully immersed in the training, was unaware of the need for moderation. She sits on him and remarks that humans really struggle with staying healthy and always seem to need exercise, stressing that he might collapse if he keeps pushing himself. As she gets up, she asks if he at least feels a little healthier. Hinata replies that he feels like he's getting closer to that, though he's not sure. She then challenges him to sprint down the path lined with clovers leading up to a hill and asks him to follow her lead. As she starts running, Hinata looks at her body, shakes his head, and mutters that he's too mesmerized to keep up. However, he quickly realizes he needs to push himself if he doesn't want to be left behind. Esmeralda noticed that Hinata had moved forward, completely focused on catching up to her. He was running and muttering to himself that he couldn't see his master ahead and wondered if she had already gone too far. Just as he thought this, he saw her coming up from behind. Hinata asked if she was okay, explaining that he wasn't used to exercising. She then took the lead again, and he suggested that they walk for a bit. Esmeralda raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant, telling him to pick up the pace because he needed to become healthier. Hinata countered that there was no need to push themselves so hard. She stopped for a moment, looked at him closely, and, sweating, explained that getting healthy would extend their lifespans. They would have more time to spend together. Hinata was stunned, thinking that from the perspective of a witch who lived for centuries, a human's lifespan probably seemed like a blink of an eye. He caught up with her and asked if they could take a walk instead. She wondered what he was rambling about. Hinata responded that walking was great for their health, and besides, this beautiful place was perfect for the two of them to enjoy at a leisurely pace. He suggested that they create plenty of joyful moments together, which would far outweigh the tough times. Esmeralda smiled, glad to hear that he was on board. Hinata then added that he felt like he had just added 10 years to his life with that walk and asked if it was too late to make it happen. Esmeralda chuckled and told him not to say such unreasonable things. The next day, it was time for the class on controlling familiars, and Hinata found that one of them was incredibly obedient to him. Esmeralda was surprised and told him that she had nothing to teach him about this. He didn't need to go so far as to handle it all on his own. Hinata replied that he never knew he had such a talent. As the familiars surrounded him, he mentioned that their attention was making him feel ticklish. Esmeralda scoffed and said she would never, ever be jealous of a beast. Hinata, curious, asked her what she meant by beast. As he continued to play with the familiars, Esmeralda told him not to mind her remarks, adding that being adored by a familiar was a true sign of a great wizard. One of the familiars began to nudge against Hinata's clothes, trying to get inside them. Hinata quickly stopped it, but Esmeralda, feeling a pang of jealousy, muttered that she wished she could be that close and sticky too. Hinata, confused, asked what she was doing, only to hear her almost let slip a dangerous desire that she quickly tried to suppress, absorbing her emotions into the floor. Hinata, having overheard everything, raised an eyebrow. Esmeralda turned to leave, saying that it was enough for the day. If things went any further, she'd lose her mind. Hinata, however, asked her to wait, saying that he still hadn't learned anything. Hinata, still puzzled by the mention of being sticky, finally says he gets it and asks her to give him a moment. Esmeralda wonders what he means and asks if she hasn't taught him enough for the day. She steps ahead, but suddenly feels something sticky sticking to her. Hinata, noticing her discomfort, says that if she says so, he'll give it his all. Esmeralda quickly insists that it's not what he thinks. She explains that something has gotten inside her clothes, and in a flustered panic, she shouts Hinata's name, accusing him of suddenly changing his intentions after mentioning wanting to get sticky. Just then, she falls to the ground, and a swarm of slimes appears, crawling over her. She exclaims that Hinata was surprisingly slippery. Hinata protests, saying it wasn't him, and reminds her that she had said she wanted to get sticky. He then casually mentions that he gathered a bunch of sticky familiars for her. He apologizes for hogging all the fun, and acknowledges that she must have wanted to play with her familiars as well. Esmeralda, though feeling everything was wrong, can't help but see the kindness behind his actions. Krista was looking at the photos, remarking that they brought back memories. A witch standing next to her commented that it must have been around the time Krista started her apprenticeship. Esmeralda, appearing from another corner, asked what she was doing in the storage room. Krista explained that she had found a picture from when she was teaching there. Esmeralda was shocked to see the photos of herself and asked when Krista had taken them. Krista admitted that she had secretly snapped them with a magic tool, saying that there was a time like that. She reminisced about a particular moment, 18 years ago, during a fire magic class when Esmeralda couldn't control the flames. Krista had asked her what she should do, and after chanting a spell, she had watched as the flames seemed to dodge around Esmeralda. Krista had lifted her up, calling it another blunder and asking how many times she'd have to teach Esmeralda. She wondered if Esmeralda was reflecting on her actions. After all, it was supposed to be something different. Esmeralda, overcome with emotion, hugged her, saying she couldn't take it anymore. She told Krista how amazing she was and how much she respected her. Krista, however, replied that it seemed Esmeralda lacked both reflection and respect. Gently, she pointed out that Esmeralda was simply infatuated with witches, and if she kept this up, Krista suggested she might as well give up on her dream of becoming one. Esmeralda denied Krista's words, firmly stating that she would never return to being human. She had never truly fit into human society. Her master had dedicated her life to magic, wielding power that allowed her to stand alone, unshaken by the mundane world or anyone's commands. Esmeralda admired that way of life and had fallen in love with it. She wanted to become a strong witch like Krista and live independently, free from the constraints of others. Krista, however, replied that it was impossible. Esmeralda couldn't even sleep on her own. Her body might have grown, but she was still a child. How could she survive on her own? Esmeralda shrugged, saying that was just how it was. Krista gently reminded her that Esmeralda wasn't like her. The lifespan of a witch was incredibly long, and Esmeralda could never handle being alone for so many years. What she truly needed wasn't magic power, but something she could really love from the heart. Esmeralda, feeling the weight of her master's words, insisted that she was serious. In a fit of determination, she raged, saying she would become a witch, recognized as an adult by mastering strong magic. She would receive a mansion and live as a solitary witch. The scene shifted to the present, where Krista was watching Esmeralda laugh as she relived the moment. Suddenly, they saw Hinata practicing with fire magic nearby. As he lost control and began to fall, Esmeralda quickly rushed forward to catch him. Krista, observing from a distance, remarked that she needed to put out the fire. Esmeralda asked if Hinata was okay, apologizing for him falling again while practicing. Krista, observing from a distance, understood that Esmeralda was different from her. Esmeralda responded that it was fine to fall. She had taught Hinata many times, and she understood the feelings of those who struggled to get it right. She gently hugged him and patted his head, reassuring him that there was nothing to worry about. She promised that she would help him master wonderful magic. Hinata, feeling exhausted, murmured that he wouldn't be able to move. Krista, watching the scene, couldn't help but think of Esmeralda as a solitary witch. One day, Hinata was walking through the forest, his clothes torn from his training. He was currently trying to repair them when Esmeralda noticed the sharp object in his hand. She quickly told him to throw it away, saying she couldn't let him handle something so dangerous. She offered to teach him how to sew faster and more safely. Hinata couldn't help but feel like he was in a sewing class. Esmeralda held up a thread, and he commented that it just seemed like a normal piece of string. She explained that the thread was imbued with magical energy, which made it feel alive. Esmeralda continued, saying she could manipulate the thread as if it were part of her own body, allowing her to sew at high speed without even touching it. As she demonstrated, the stitches began to form on their own, and she cut the thread once the stitching was complete. Hinata marveled at how the clothes looked as good as new. He thought about giving it a try and wondered if he could manage to do it himself. As he searched around, he found some of Esmeralda's old clothes which had been magically altered. He thought he could fix them too. Esmeralda asked him to wait, but he had already imbued the thread with magic and was using the high-speed remote sewing technique. As he continued, Esmeralda felt something strange, and Hinata also noticed that the process was harder than he expected. The thread had begun to fray. She mentioned the clothes again, and Hinata wondered if it would still work, unsure of what had gone wrong. Esmeralda, feeling completely confused at that moment, couldn't understand what had happened either. As Esmeralda fell to the ground, Hinata quickly asked what had happened to her. She replied that she hadn't washed those clothes in a week, and it felt like her own magical power had settled into them as if they were part of her body. Hinata, concerned, asked if washing would get rid of the magical power. Esmeralda explained that while Hinata had managed to do it so easily, it hadn't gone as smoothly for her. Hinata apologized for the way things turned out and offered to buy her a new one. Esmeralda, however, reassured him, saying that it wasn't that bad. He had done his best with all his might, and she didn't mind if it was a little awkward. She didn't care if the clothes were imperfect. Hinata, still concerned, told her it might be better to stop wearing them. Esmeralda wondered what he meant, explaining that she was planning to wear the clothes for the class. Even though she had tried them on, she hadn't expected them to turn out so badly. Hinata insisted that he would definitely buy her a new one. Esmeralda, smiling softly, said she wouldn't let her disciples' efforts go to waste. While Hinata was taking pictures of Esmeralda, she asked where he had found the camera. He explained that he had borrowed the lens from Krista. It was a magical tool that allowed them to transfer what they saw onto paper, enabling them to capture countless memories. He then took a picture of himself with Esmeralda, asking her to smile. She became flustered and mentioned that she wasn't used to this kind of thing. When the photo appeared, Hinata was thrilled, but Esmeralda's reaction made things awkward. She said she couldn't take a decent photo at all and assumed that Hinata had been watching her so nervously that it caused her to make a strange face. That was why she disliked photos. Hinata admitted that he couldn't take a great picture with his arms. Esmeralda believed it was all her fault. She then brought over a lens and explained that it reflected the ideal appearance of a person, asking him to try it out. He was curious, wanting to see his ideal self. She asked if he would prefer to remain as he was. Just then, Krista arrived and mentioned that the lens only showed a reflection. She asked if they were going to take a picture with such an idealized version of themselves and suggested they show her the result. When they checked, they realized that both Esmeralda and Hinata appeared with totally different personalities. Esmeralda looked like a celebrity actress, while Hinata had transformed into a powerful, wild magician. Krista admired the magic of the lens and reassured them, saying it wasn't quite like that. She handed them the lens, explaining that it contained magic that made it easy to take professional-grade photographs. Hinata then took a picture of Esmeralda, and after seeing the result, he was impressed. He felt he could trust the magic crystal. The photo was stunning, and he told Esmeralda how beautiful it was. Esmeralda, surprised, asked if it was really her in the picture. Krista confirmed that the crystal was just as amazing as she had hoped. Esmeralda, curious, asked what kind of magic Krista had used. She soon realized that the lens was ordinary and that the magic had been cast on her to prevent her from feeling nervous. Krista asked if they weren't impressed by how well the photo turned out, explaining that it was a gift to capture something so beautiful. Hinata found it strange, wondering how he could take such a great photo with his lack of skill. Krista explained that it wasn't just about skill. The most important thing was understanding the charm of the person being photographed. The person who could capture someone in their most appealing way was the one who believed they were the most attractive. That, she said, was the greatest magic of all. Esmeralda then said she would try to do the same and asked Hinata how much he thought he was worth. She took a picture of him and was excited to see the result. However, the photo of Hinata was blurry, despite her efforts. Krista smiled and explained that the magic couldn't fix everything. The scene shifts to the Forest of Morgue, where Esmeralda was teaching Hinata about medicinal mushrooms. She explained that mushrooms serve as ingredients for various magical potions, including those for health recovery and magic. They would study these medicinal mushrooms, and she cautioned him to be careful, as some of them contained terrible toxins that could even invade the brain. As she spoke, Hinata fell as she had warned, and he asked if she thought it was pretty, leaning in to take a closer look. Esmeralda quickly realized that he had inhaled the spores from the mushroom and told him they needed to administer an antidote fast. Hinata said he wouldn't be able to handle it, but Esmeralda was glad she had prepared in advance. Just as she was about to give him the antidote, he threw it away. Concerned, she thought that the poison had already reached his brain. Hinata, however, felt something different. Esmeralda noticed his behavior had changed when he suddenly grabbed her neck. Instead of hurting her, he gently touched her chin and told her that such a serious expression didn't suit her. She looked much cuter when she smiled. He then gave her a romantic look, leaving her flustered. She nervously commented that it was just as she had expected. It was an invitation. Esmeralda thought to herself that the neurotoxin must be altering his mind, leading to lewdness and promiscuity. This mushroom, she realized, fundamentally changed a person's personality, making them flirt with anyone and everyone. Hinata, now under the influence of the mushroom's toxins, transformed into a kissing monster. Esmeralda, unable to handle it any longer, grew shy and asked him to wait, wondering if he was planning to force himself on her. Hinata calmly replied that he would never do such a thing. It went against his principles. Esmeralda, despite the situation, thought that even while manipulated, he was still kind. Hinata then mentioned that he would make her want to kiss him. Esmeralda, realizing the situation, thought that this wasn't the real Hinata and that the mushroom's toxin had completely invaded his brain. Determined, she acted seriously and told him to wake up, promising she would bring him back to his senses. Hinata, however, asked her to close her eyes and playfully called her a little kitten before leaning in to kiss her. Just as he did, he suddenly snapped out of it, asking himself what he was doing. The effect of the spores had worn off quickly, and Hinata realized he had only inhaled the spores for a short time. Still confused, he asked what had just happened, his face red and his breath heavy. Closing his eyes, he stood still, wondering if it was the mushroom's poison. He quickly flipped through a page about poisonous mushrooms and found the cure. Although he understood what needed to be done, he hesitated, unsure if he could really go through with it. But with no other choice, he decided he had to do it for Esmeralda. Feeling completely out of place, he placed the antidote in her mouth. Esmeralda, feeling like Hinata had kissed her, was taken aback. Hinata immediately apologized for forcing the bitter medicine down her throat, but explained there was no other option. He wondered why it wasn't working as quickly as expected. He had followed the book's instructions to the letter, yet it didn't feel right. Was the antidote really the best solution, or was it more like a kiss? And, more importantly, it was his first time doing something like this. Hinata and Esmeralda entered a clothing shop, where the shopkeeper greeted them, mentioning that they carried outfits of legendary figures such as the magician Faust and the charismatic witch Yaga. Esmeralda explained that this was a magical clothing brand specializing in outfits for famous witches, and that her own attire was a custom order from this shop. Hinata, curious, wondered if it was really okay to purchase something so extravagant. Esmeralda smiled and assured him that she would buy him whatever he wanted. As he looked through the selections, she added that no matter how insensitive he was, he would surely feel a flutter of excitement upon receiving such a gift. She called it her fluttering present strategy and suggested that they go on a date together wearing their new clothes. A lady staff member then spoke up, explaining that their products weren't just about appearance. The clothing included special features, such as reflective fabric that repelled fire magic and innerwear designed to boost magical power. Each item was tailored to grant various effects based on the wizard's needs. Hinata meant that there were so many patterns, he wasn't sure which one to choose. The staff suggested he try one on. Esmeralda felt a bit embarrassed as he went to change into the clothes, worried about him seeing her during the dress change. When he emerged and asked how it looked, Esmeralda's nose began to bleed. She explained, flustered, that the effect granted by the outfit was magic that increased one's cuteness. Hinata, slightly embarrassed, denied it, claiming that it was just an increase in attack power. The female staff also handed a dress to Hinata, asking him to try it on. Feeling embarrassed, Hinata hesitated but eventually put on a dress meant for girls. When Esmeralda saw him, she couldn't help but think he looked incredibly cute. Trying to control her emotions, she turned away, telling herself that she was supposed to remain calm, not feeling all giddy like this. It was backwards. Hinata then tried on another dress and asked Esmeralda how it looked. She turned around, assuring him that it was fine, and added that even if it was expensive, she would buy whatever he wanted. When he showed her the new outfit, she asked if it was really okay to pick something so plain. She thought maybe he was just being polite since it didn't seem to have any special effects. Hinata, however, insisted that it was a good choice. He then showed her another piece of cloth, one that matched her own clothing. Esmeralda felt a bit shy, but purchased it, muttering that she was ready to go home. Hinata, not wanting to miss the moment, asked her to wait for him and suggested they walk side by side in matching outfits. Esmeralda's face flushed at the thought. Hinata noticed and asked what was wrong. She quickly realized that if they walked together, her red face would be too obvious, and that wasn't how she had envisioned things going.